So, hello, my name is Colin Thompson, and welcome to the Racism and Crypto Regulation Challenges for Black Business Startups at the Black Blockchain Summit. Today, we have two panelist guests to address this topic. Let me first introduce our guests. We have Alakanani Itulang and Rasan Boykin. Please take about 2 minutes, please, and introduce yourselves.
Okay,
Alec,
let me go.
Yeah,
Thank you
absolutely.
so much. Yes, my name is Alakanani Igrele. Most people call me the Bitcoin lady because I was one of those first people long time back, the 2012 in Botswana when I started teaching people about Bitcoin and educating people about Bitcoin technology long time back. Yeah, I'm based in Gaborone, Botswana, and I run the Satoshi Center. Satoshi Center is simply the center of education. We educate people on Bitcoin and blockchain tech. So basically, that's what I do. I'm a speaker of blockchain. I'm an educator of Bitcoin, and I spend most of my time educating people on the space and protecting people in my country against scams and scammers. So that's in short. Yeah.
Thank you. Rasan.
Hi, I'm Rasan Boykin. I'm the general counsel of Hashflow, which is a decentralized finance exchange. My background is I was a banking attorney for 10 years. I worked at most of the banks in New York. I left there and I worked for Google for around 8 years in a variety of positions. Um, I ended my time at Google as the manager of the AI and machine learning legal team for Google Cloud. And I left and I joined the crypto space as the general counsel of Hashflow. Um, I also spend a lot of my time kind of educating people on blockchain technology and crypto regulations, in addition to AI regulations, especially now because of generative AI and the growth of generative AI. Yeah, and I spend a lot of time kind of understanding and navigating the global landscape of the developments of crypto regulation in the United States and abroad because of the implications they have for the businesses that want to operate in the space.
Yeah, that's
Thank
awesome.
you. And I think that both of you hit on a point there, educating others, making sure that people know how to work in that space. And part of that is
Yeah,
not just educating individuals on how they can be safe in blockchain, but those young entrepreneurs who want to actually start a business in the blockchain space. So, Rashawn, I'm going to stay with you first. What are the unique challenges Black entrepreneurs face in the crypto industry compared to other sectors? And then, Alkanani, you can please chime in after that. Thank you. What are the unique challenges Black entrepreneurs face in the crypto industry compared to other sectors?
Yeah, yes, sure. So, in my experience, and I've worked, like I said, primarily in financial services and in technology, you're going to run into a lot of the same challenges you're going to run into at working at a technology firm. There's not going to be a lot of you. That's just the first thing. Participation of minorities in technology companies is woefully low. That's true for the larger players and for the small players, and it's definitely true in crypto. I would say that you're going to be for crypto specifically, you're going to be dealing with a lot of libertarian um, counterparties and partners. The libertarian way of thinking is very prevalent in crypto because of its where it began. And if any of you know anything about libertarianism, it's sometimes, I would say most of the time, associated with a version of conservatism. So, at least in the United States, you're going to run into a lot of, I don't know, I'm old enough to use the word conservative carefully because what was conservative when I was growing up is not what conservative is today. You're going to run more into what conservative is today, which is different than what I knew. And in running into that, you're going to have to be prepared for that because that's just what it is. And there's a real, at least I've seen, there's a real lack of understanding of some of the basic concepts of meritocracy and diversity and the values of diversity, things that I kind of grew up with and thought were second nature, they're all being challenged now in a weird way that number one is bad for the industry and bad for most of the companies. They just don't know it because they just don't know it. They're too young. But is also it'll be a challenge for you starting your own business with those kind of counterparties if they don't have a basic understanding of your value and how you got where you were and why it makes money, why it makes money to be diverse. Like all of those things, those concepts are not really prevalent. And then finally, I'd say, as regulations develop, the regulators have, how do I put this? Sometimes relied on principles which inadvertently hurt minority communities. I'll give you an example. The accredited investor rule for the SEC mandates that in order for you to invest in private enterprises, you have to make a certain amount of money in order to qualify as an accredited investor. That rule was made to make sure that the people who are investing were sophisticated enough to understand the risks that they were getting involved in. That was the whole point of the rule. However, in my experience, what it's done is just kind of limit the ability of minorities and those from socioeconomically deprived areas from actually getting access to things that might actually help them. So those are kind of the three prongs that I see that are kind of unique. Well, two that are unique and one is normal, unfortunately normal, facing Black entrepreneurs today.
Thank you. And I'll kind of come to you. You're
maybe
being in Botswana, which is a sort of a different environment. So I'm wondering if you face some of the same challenge, not you, but the industry face some of the same challenges that Rashawn mentioned.
I think for regulation is one of the, I'll say it's one of the hurdles that a lot of entrepreneurs in my area face, because you find that regulations tend to be kind of very complex and they don't really define or try to protect a coming entrepreneur. For example, if in Botswana, if you are building anything that has got to do with virtual assets, you need to have a license to do so. So, for example, a license, you need to pay. There's certain payments that you need to do. There is a registration fee you need to pay. And then there is also a certain amount of money they need you to have in your bank account in order for you to apply for a license. So being a startup becomes a challenge. One, you don't have funding. Maybe, for example, you are still bootstrapping. You are still trying to build up yourself as a startup. So there's regulations instead of trying to protect the startup. Sometimes unintentionally they build some kind of a barrier that is so hard for an upcoming entrepreneur or a startup. So I do believe that is one of the things, but especially for us in Botswana, you are expected to have a license for you to run a startup that is got to do with blockchain, more especially when it's tokenized, when it has got virtual assets. So you need to have that virtual license in order to operate your startup. So if you don't have that license and you are found to have built a solution that is tokenized, that is got a token, you're going to be charged as high as 250,000 Botswana people, which is almost like $22,000. And for a startup, that is like really hefty fee. So regulations tend to become a barrier, especially and very complex, I would say. And I'm talking of my country. I don't know other regions in Africa, but in Botswana, because virtual assets are regulated, it is a must that you must have a license in order for you to run a virtual asset business. Number two, I'll say maybe the issue of the gap in knowledge. Many people or many entrepreneurs don't have much knowledge in as far as blockchain is concerned. They don't have the information on how they can navigate the blockchain space. So in that way, you find that a lot of people don't have the resources or the information to enable them to become part of what is happening right now in the space. It doesn't become more of a, what do I say? We're talking about regulations and racism. It doesn't become more of that. It's more of not having the resources. We don't have like enough information on the emerging technologies. We don't have like much information and resources in Africa as compared to other places, and this make it so difficult for people to have the right mentorship. For example, for example, one of the things that we wanted to do at Satoshi Center was to connect entrepreneurs with mentors so that they can have proper mentorship, so that they can have proper networking. When you compare what is happening in the blockchain space to what is happening in day-to-day technologies or Web2 technologies, there are networking and mentorship programs or incubators and accelerators which are not really available for a lot of blockchain businesses. We don't have like blockchain focus uh, Y Combinator kind of thing or Techstars or those kind of accelerators, and we don't have those, more especially in regions where they are developing, like developing regions, or in places like in Africa. We don't have those, so it kind of like leave us behind, so that we end up not being part of what is happening, and we miss a lot. Yeah, I think that becomes kind of a challenge, and we are unable to like get the or so when we are unable to like navigate the challenges that we face, in as entrepreneurs, and end up not having an opportunity to grow as startups in Africa. I
Right.
don't know if I make it.
And it sounds like it's really challenging. You mentioned the resources, and it's not just capital
Yeah.
resource. It's also that
No.
knowledge. People who have been
Yeah.
there and that, and can serve as mentors, and can really help the newbies, so to speak, learn. But I do want to go back to what is one major stumbling block. I want to say globally, and that's access to capital. So, and I'll
Yeah.
kind of want to skip this one first. What role does
Yeah.
access to capital play in the development of Black-owned crypto startups, and how can this barrier be overcome?
Yeah, I think there is no way you can run a business without capitals. But statistically, we've seen that black entrepreneurs never really get like a bigger share from like venture capitalists and from investors and whatnot. Um, there's always some kind of red lining. I'll say, when you're black, I'm sorry to say that, you know, there's always like we're more like a risk. People consider that the blacks mostly a risk.
Right.
Young entrepreneurs more of a risk. So you end up not kind of receiving enough capital to be able to run your business. And if you are receiving the funding, it's not as equal as your counterparts, the other part. So that's always like a challenge. So capital is very, 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 very important. It is important for you to run a business. You cannot run a business out of your pocket. Eventually, you will run dry. And then again, if you run a business out of your pocket, you miss the other thing that is very important. For example, if you receive money from an investor, it doesn't only come with money; it also come with mentorship. It's also come with advices. It also come with skills. It comes with guidance. It comes with all that. So going for somebody to invest in a business, it gives you all these things that when you do this thing alone, it will be difficult for you. It will be difficult for you to build your business into an actual business that can grow. So I'll say access to capital is very, 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 very important. Because for me, it is not only about the money, it's about what comes with the money. It comes with people, it comes with skills, it comes with mentorship, guidance. Somebody's able to guide you properly to run a business because some of these people are business people. So they have gone through the challenges that you are still to go through. So if you get capital, it comes with human capital also. It comes with a person,
Right.
I'll say. Yeah.
So are you finding that there are more and more entities that are set up to help startups in Botswana in this space get the capital, as you mentioned, also get the mentoring, also get the handholding? Is that being addressed even from an institution or from the government, or is it still not being addressed fully?
I'll say with Web2 businesses, we've been seeing, there'll be like what do you call it, hackathons, there'll be boot camps, there'll be all these things happening. But as far as Web3 is concerned, there isn't much happening. There isn't much going on. So, especially in my country. Um, I've organized an event that is coming up next year. I approached the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and I talked to them. I said, I want to have a summit where I want to educate people about the blockchain technology, not only educate the people or the young entrepreneurs. I also want to educate the government. I want to educate people in ministry, people in different government departments. So fortunately enough, they were very receptive, and I'm going to be having that event next year in May. The whole idea is for us to be able to have all these things that other technologies have in Botswana, all these opportunities that we don't have as people who are into Web3. We don't have opportunities to showcase our development. We don't have the opportunity to showcase our innovations. So the whole idea is once we have this summit going on and people knowing that we've got young entrepreneurs in Botswana building on the blockchain technology, maybe we'll be given opportunities to meet venture capitalists, have access to capital. So maybe there won't be much questions because a lot of problems that we are facing here mostly is people do not know what Bitcoin is, for example. For them, once you talk blockchain, Bitcoin, you're talking about Ponzi schemes. So
Right.
just because you say I'm building on blockchain, they'll be like, okay, you're building a Ponzi. So that lack of understanding and knowledge, becomes a barrier for a lot of young entrepreneurs, I'll say.
Okay. And it's the summits that you're putting together are things that hopefully will make a difference. And Hassan, as I turn to you, I know in the US, there is a lot of, I say several different initiatives to address minorities, helping them start business in several industries. And look at the blockchain industry. The same thing as far as the access to capital. What role does access to capital play in the development of these Black-owned startups? How can this barrier be overcome? And are you seeing more attention being put there and support coming from, I want to say, non-Black or even Black financiers or investors?
Yeah. So capital is critical in the startup ecosystem. And for those like, it's not the same as like starting a dance school or a restaurant. It's different. You need capital for those too, but in the startup world in technology, it's part of the lifeblood of kind of the life cycle of the corporations and the kind of the whole VC ecosystem. So you're not going to be able to have a successful startup without access to some kind of capital, even if you're building by yourself. In my experience, solo entrepreneurship is very rarely successful. You usually need multiple people or a team. It is possible to build something, without capital if you have the right network and the right team. Once or twice I've seen it, but not very often. You're going to need to eventually, even if you have a working product, and they're going to want to see a product, or at least a prototype. It's going to be very difficult to be successful without access to capital. In my experience, are there programs and organizations out there specifically targeting minority groups in the crypto space to fund their projects? No, I haven't seen that. It's possible they're out there, but I definitely have not seen it, especially in crypto, like I said, because in the United States, it definitely did those concepts are challenging for the industry, at least in my experience, and the people that I deal with. So no, I have not seen that. In technology in general, I've seen more. I'd like to actually give a shout out to Google because they have several programs that I was a part of, a couple of them personally, where they were looking for diverse entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in residence and those kind of programs, accelerators. There's definitely those out there for technology, but for crypto specifically, you're going to struggle. You're definitely going to struggle because there's nothing that I know of that's specific to, that our community that will provide the type of support that Alakanani was just talking about.
Right. Why is it lacking, in your opinion?
probably because of the libertarian slash MAGA slash youth that I see in the industry. If I had to guess, I don't really. That's probably what it is. And then the other issue with crypto, and this is just me on my soapbox, is that, I like blockchain and I'm very bullish on the prospect of blockchain technology. But a lot of the crypto projects I see are not really substantive. And that's another problem, right? There's just not a lot of real projects out there. Not that what I've seen. Like I see a lot of copycats. And again, I'm old enough to remember the dot-com boom. It reminds me of that, except from what I've seen, it's been in like 2 or 3 cycles. You had the NFT boom, and then you had the original blockchain boom, and the industry itself is just kind of going through its cycles as it grows. So a lot of these projects are not, they're not going to be of interest to the VCs that would typically invest. So now you're stuck with this smaller VC community that's very crypto knowledgeable, who don't really have a real understanding of the benefits of diversity or DI, or they don't really understand that, or don't support it, or whatever their issues are. And you're going to have access to them. You're going to have to convince them that your project is different, or at least has monetary value. And it's a small community, so it's tough. It's definitely going to be tough.
Yeah, you mentioned just the fact that the community is smaller. And Al-Kanani, you mentioned that there's not a lot of knowledge out there. Well, knowledge is out there, but not a lot of people sharing the knowledge. So, Rasan, I want to stay with you for a moment. How can the Black crypto startups navigate what I would think is to be a very complex regulatory environment while maintaining compliance and fostering growth? You mentioned initially that there's a lot of compliance regulations out there. So how do these startups really navigate that if they're not being mentored, if they're not really being shown the way?
Yeah, it's tough, and that's a function of the United States being behind, because there are a lack of clear rules in the United States. My general advice to most people who are building a crypto project is geofence the United States, because there's just not a lot of clarity, and you're going to get that's not specific to being Black. It's just being specific to the industry. If you still want to build, there are a lot of use cases I've seen that are useful that don't require access to the United States market. So you could do that. You're going to have a tough time finding funding. I would suggest you start building with a small team. See if you can get a working prototype up. And then you're going to either have to pitch it to that small community that you're going to have to get access to. Not easy, not impossible, but not easy. There are people out there who are kind of older in the crypto space or successful that have connections that you could probably meet going to summits like this and hackathons and things like that. You'll meet a couple people. If you have a working product, you have a much better chance to get funding. If you have a real community, you have a real chance to get funding, a real network effect. If you have a network effect, kind of supporting the project that you have, you could probably find funding that way. And that would be the 2 ways I would do it. With regard to regulation, you're going to need legal advice. Now, I just happen to know several African-American attorneys in the crypto space that are really good attorneys that know crypto very well. And, I also know attorneys who are not African-American in the crypto space that know very well. You can find legal help to guide you in what steps to take. But I'll just, here's your free advice to all the entrepreneurs out there. If you're in the United States, well, if you're anywhere, my free advice to you is to geofence the United States, probably geofence the UK, and by far geofence all the OFAC jurisdictions, which are all the sanctioned jurisdictions. That's your starting point. Do not think that you can outsmart or that it's theoretically, you have some theoretical reason why it doesn't make sense to not follow OFAC. That will get you in prison. And it doesn't matter that entity is formed in a jurisdiction that's not in the United States, it doesn't matter. You will go to jail. So don't. And then the next thing I would say is definitely the United States. And the third one is the UK. Once you geofence those off, at least you then have a starting point, which will allow you to build a base product, which then you could probably get, some support behind, assuming that the use case is useful.
And by geofence, you mean not doing business in those countries.
I cannot be clearer when I say to all the entrepreneurs that reach out to me on I would say, a weekly basis. I have entrepreneurs reaching out to me. I want to say this as clearly as I can. If you violate and service OFAC jurisdictions, you will go to jail. Don't do it. Period. And if you want to have a successful business in crypto, under the current rules that there are now, geofence the United States and do not service the United States. Until there is a regime passed in the United States that mirrors MiCA, what they're doing in Europe, it is not worth your time, effort, or risk exposure to do that. Do not do that. You're also going to have a hard time getting funding if you don't have a real entity set up and you're not following the rules that I just gave you. And if anybody has a question about that, feel free to email me, and I will then tell you in email. Don't violate OFAC, period.
We'll put a pin in this part of the record. I'll fast forward back to this and play that back. Yes. And I want to come to you because you gave us a scenario earlier where you mentioned that if startups don't get that license, they will then have to pay a fine. You said that was almost $22,000. Yeah. That's a fine, correct?
Yeah.
So that's fine. With that scenario, how could an entrepreneur or a startup avoid that? How would they gain that knowledge as opposed to doing it, the learning from that mistake?
I think sometimes it's an issue of like coming together, for me, a kind of, I would say a collaborative effort of entrepreneurs coming together and like sharing information. Sometimes you end up doing something because you don't have proper information. Like right now, what we have just been given, geofence in the United States and the UK. Sometimes it's an issue of, how do I navigate this thing without actually getting myself into trouble. So coming together and working together, we tend to share information and resources. And as such, you protect each other. And also, I think it also calls for us having like some kind of advocacy group, because in that sense, we are able to be able to have information or be able to be part of the policy making. We'll be able to make policies that are supportive to us instead of having policies and regulations that tend to suffocate innovation and entrepreneurship. So, like I say, I think it's an issue. It's a two thing: collaboration, and also, having some kind of advocacy group that will kind of help in that sense. Because sometimes, if as startups, we take for granted that with our innovation, we just have to innovate. We end up not caring of the laws of the countries or the jurisdiction where we are established. So it's very important that, coming together, it tends to open one's eyes. So if I have other group of entrepreneurs and I'm part of their group, you'll find that I'll get information that I not take serious, or I never thought they were like really, really serious, like regulations, like really, really serious, like getting fined $22,000. That is like a very hefty fee for anybody. So we need to have those two things: collaboration and also, being part of the policymakers, or I'll say policymakers advocacy group that will really, really help entrepreneurs so that they don't find themselves into any sort of trouble.
Right. So having the community and then being part of that decision-making team.
Yeah.
So I want to get out of here on this question. Looking ahead, what changes, and I'll kind of start with you, what change would you like to see in the next, let's say, 5 years regarding crypto regulation and support for Black startups? And I know in Botswana, there's no Black startups, it's startups because most of them are Black, right?
Yeah, Black.
But specifically in this sector, what would you want to see in the next 5 years that provides, I'm going to say, consistent support for these startups?
Yeah. I would say the regulations should be like really, really clear. Sometimes the regulations are so complex. You don't really get really what the regulations are saying. So they should be really, really clear as to what exactly are they regulating. Are they regulating the digital assets? Are they regulating the idea of just because you have the word blockchain in your business and it has to be regulated? We need the regulations to be less complex because I do believe at the moment the regulations are so complex and also you cannot really, really understand what the regulations are saying. And there should be uniformity somehow. They should be uniform. So, because like for example, murder is murder. So if you kill, you're killing. So it's wrong. It's a criminal offense. So there should also be like regulations that are very clear globally. So they're very clear and say this is what you're supposed to be doing in blockchain. This is what you're not supposed to be doing. That's one thing that I would love to really, really, really see. So maybe so I would love to see resources being spread around, so that even somebody in the deepest rural areas of Botswana is able to have information and be able to know that there is this thing called Web3. You find that so at the moment, some of the people we are talking about innovating on the Web3, we're talking about the blockchain, Bitcoin, and all these kind of things. Somebody in the rural area does not know of those, maybe because of an issue of internet not being reliable or being an issue of, you know, the resources not reaching people. And, it's my prayer that, maybe in the future we'll see, somebody in the rural area, having the information and the resources, equal resources that somebody in the United States has. Nowadays, we talk of financial inclusion, for example, what
Right.
we said it when it helps in financial inclusion. But the question goes to say, how can that person be part of, the monetary system or be included financially when he does not even have the information and resources to even teach him about financial inclusion?
Right.
So I think that's what I would love to see in the future.
Yeah, and I think your summit may be a great vehicle or a great opportunity to start sharing that information. So good luck in your summit.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, for regulation in the future, I mean, first in the United States, they've got to kind of get it together and stop ceding innovation to our global competitors. Meaning, they need to pass something like MiCA. And to be honest, I'm not even as you know, I don't need it to be perfect. I need it to be
Yeah.
good, right? Just good, right? Right now, we don't have anything. And what's going to happen is that most of the innovation in space is going to go globally because they have advice from people like me, which are telling you, don't build here and don't service the United States. So they need to pass a comprehensive regulatory framework. That's number one. And then one of the real benefits of blockchain and crypto, but mostly blockchain, is that it's one of those unique opportunities in time where regulators, if we do it correctly, can now challenge assumptions for the basis of some of the rules that we currently have. That's a fancy way of saying, like the SEC and the OCC and Treasury and like all of them, CFTC, they could use this opportunity to really look at some of the rules they have, which apply to all startups and all financing, and see if the rules that we currently have really make sense, are achieving the goals that they were passed to achieve. Like at the beginning of this session, I mentioned the accredited investor rule. You should really look at that because I don't know how many people it's protecting, and I do know how many people it's harming. And then there's a bunch of stuff, like a lot of the escrow rules. There's a lot of like middlemen in our financial services industry, which are getting paid a lot of money for services that I'm not sure are actually providing protections anymore. And this gives us an opportunity to actually look at that. Because if you look at remittance, for example, if you were to compare the efficiency of the SWIFT system against the efficiency of Ethereum at moving money, it's right there. You can see how fast money moves. So there's a real promise here to create efficiencies that we're failing on because there are a lot of a bunch of scammy kind of actors in the space that have kind of ruined it for everybody. So I'd really like to see them work on comprehensive regulation like MICA, pass that. And if we do it the right way, use it as an opportunity to try to improve on the rules that we currently have.
Great. Great. So we are about out of time. So I do want to thank both of you for joining. Alakani and Rasan, thank you for joining today. My name is Colin Thompson. It's been a pleasure to host the Racism and Crypto Regulation Challenges for Black Startups, Baraza, for the 2024 Black Blockchain Summit. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at another event.